Hi, everybody. This is Linda West, and I am in Santa Monica. And I was lucky enough to be able to get a conversation with a captain of the 777, a pilot. And he's actually been flying around the world himself, so he's only gotten bits and pieces of what's going on with MH370. But I thought it would be really interesting to ask him his opinion and see what he might have to offer as far as the 777 knowledge and also what goes on with the pilot, because they're talking about it may be pilot error, some kind of, corrupt action by the crew. So anyway, welcome, Captain Dave, and thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Linda. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. And so, Dave, you fly the 777. They say that is one of the safest planes in the air. Is that true?
I agree. Yes, I've flown quite a few Boeing products, Airbus products. The 757, 767. I've been flying the 777 a little over 10 years. And I was Airbus captain, A320 as well. And by far the Boeing 777, we call it a 777 just out of habit, is probably the best I've flown. It's extremely modern, safe. It flies really well. There's normally never an issue with takeoff performance, landing performance, ability to, take it on a very long flight. We fly nonstop from the U.S. to parts of Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, Tokyo, Beijing, Shanghai, and extremely reliable. Like I say, the best plane I've flown. So.
And that's your usual route. Also, you fly to Beijing quite often, don't you? Exactly where MH370 was headed.
I used to. I sort of got turned off with the pollution and air quality there, so started to fly to Shanghai a little bit, and it was a little better there. And then been going to Hong Kong and Narita or Tokyo most recently.
Okay, so let me ask you some of the things that are coming up. I think are some of the pivotal questions that I'd like answered that I haven't seen answered by other pilots that have been interviewed on CNN and whatnot. One of them they keep bringing up is the possibility of what happened with the plane. Right now we're talking either there was pilot error of some kind, some major disaster, or we're talking some hijacking or terrorist involvement at this point. So one of the things they're talking about is pilot error. And they keep bringing up one of the flights where the pilot decided to commit suicide and take the plane down with him. Now, my question to you is, since there's 4 pilots on board the 77, 2 flying at a time, if one of the pilots decided that they wanted to go on a suicide mission, wouldn't the other pilot or co-pilot be able to do anything to stop that, or not?
Well, that scenario is, just from my perspective, is pretty extreme. Let me first say, the fact that they can't find this airplane with today's technology is astounding. It baffles my mind that it's not on some radar or been tracked. I'm sure it was, and either they're just not coming out with the information, or I have no idea. Just a massive incompetence over in that part of the world.
So let me just stop you. So, seeing you flying over there, you've flown over there rather, and you've experienced the different airports and flight control people and everything you have to deal with. Could this just be the fact that Malaysia is inept, or are you tending to think more that at this point for a plane this size with the capabilities that it has to be missing, that it would have to be more of a government cover-up at this point?
A little of both. I had a good friend who we flew together for quite a few years, and he went to work for Eastern Airlines. Then they went out of business. Then he went with Pan Am. They went out of business. Then he went to, I think it was called Air Malaysia, or it's the same company, Malaysia Airline. And he flew there for about 9 months, and he quit. He couldn't stand it anymore. He said it was a very unprofessional operation. He was a co-pilot on a 737, I want to say, at the time. And, I was sort of taken aback that he quit so quickly. And he said, "Oh, no, you just don't understand. They don't really follow rules. It's kind of a very unprofessional outfit." And so that's the only firsthand exposure I have to the cockpit culture over there. And this was about at least 10 years ago, so I don't know if they've improved or not. But so as far as someone, committed suicide, I think there's been 1 or 2 instances where there was somebody who, I don't know, had a spear gun, I remember years ago. But we brief each other, and that flight would probably only have 2 pilots because I think it was less than 8 hours flight time, in which case the rule only requires 2 pilots rather than 3 or 4. So there'd be 2 pilots. And the bizarre turn that they made, just, it's very confusing. It doesn't really follow any kind of pattern unless they had a mechanical problem or depressurization. And the altitude they descended to, I think they went to, well, the news report I read said they went to 29,500 feet, which is sort of an emergency altitude. They separate airplanes by 1,000 feet each. Mm-hmm. And like the eastbound go every 2,000, the westbound go every 2,000, like the odd numbers, like 31,000, 3,000, and the even for eastbound traffic, 30,000, 32, 34, 36. And when you get in some sort of emergency where you would have to descend, either due to a pressurization problem or some other mechanical issue where you're planning to divert to another airport, you have to go down 500 feet to stay out of the way of all the other airplanes that are along the same track. So that altitude was sort of significant, that it could have been a controlled deviation course. And they did turn back towards Malaysia, which would be, I think, the most appropriate place to turn around and land if they did have a problem.
Now let me ask you, I'm sorry, I just was wondering if, as the other theory goes, this could be a hijacking, would that also be a good altitude for a hijacker to take a plane to because it's out of the normal route of other commercial airlines?
I don't know if hijackers are sophisticated enough to know these altitude regulations. I doubt it. They would probably just say, turn around, take us to XYZ or wherever they're trying to commandeer the airplane to go to.
Well, one of the questions that was coming up around the co-pilot of the plane was when they went into his apartment, they found that he had a simulator, a flight simulator. And they were saying, some of the pilots didn't think that was so odd, but to me, if there was going to be if this was a terrorist act and this co-pilot was possibly involved, having a simulator in his house is a pretty big clue. Do you think that's normal, or do you know any other pilots that have simulators at their home?
No, I don't know anyone with a simulator at their home. I think
Right.
it is unusual. May have been very new with the company and just got hired and was trying to build experience and proficiency, taking a positive look at that. But
and explain
no,
to them. Could you explain?
yeah.
I'm sorry, Dave. Could you explain to them about the simulator and how you can go anywhere you want, simulate any? I mean, as a hijacker, the ability to have a simulator and be able to simulate flying into different places. Could you explain what that does?
Certainly, the simulator, we joke, is the ultimate video. It's a massive computer that can be built and designed to simulate exactly what the cockpit environment looks like from the door forward. The more expensive and sophisticated ones have full motion, so you feel every little bump when you're taxiing the airplane. Like when you go over the little taxiway lights, you feel a little bump, and it's extremely realistic. They incorporate sound of the engines, of the air noise, of if there's rain falling, you hear that on the through the speaker. The visual displays incredibly accurate. So they have like a wraparound visual that shows everything you do as far as movement, takeoff, maneuverability, the terrain, the city line, the mountains, everything, shorelines, stars in the sky. You can make it a full moon, a partial moon. It's pretty lightning, whatever you want to program the computer to do. So and most likely he didn't have that sophisticated a computer or simulator. He may have had sort of. Oh, he did.
From what they were showing on the news, he was supposedly working on flying into one of the places that he was supposed to be going to, but yeah, he had all sorts of different capabilities to go into different airports. So that's why
it could be just he was trying to increase his proficiency. He, like I say, he may have been inexperienced and just trying to become more proficient at going into major airports, Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, Shanghai, some of the other ones he maybe was scheduled to fly into and lacked the experience. So that is one way to build up a little experience and proficiency as far as operating into those airports.
Okay, so that's not necessarily an indication that he should be looked at as a possible suspect. So let's move on. They're talking about some of the things we know for sure is that and excuse me, I'm not an aviation expert, so there's no transponder. The transponder wasn't working. The tracking isn't working. They can't find it on radar. The latest Wall Street Journal article came out this morning and said that from all indications, the plane actually flew an additional 4 hours somewhere that we have no idea. So what does this rule out now? Mechanical error at this point, or what would you say?
Well, the transponder has about 5 positions. There's off, there's TARA, and I'm just used to turning the switch on. and the TARA is the highest level. They give every airplane a distinct 4-number code, and it enables air traffic control to distinguish one plane from another. Every airplane has a 4-digit code that they use to identify you. Now, the radar sweeps and it picks up the just it gets a return of the physical presence of the airplane, and then they attach the code to it. So even if they turn off their transponder, they're still going to get a return of a target of an airplane. It also has altitude reporting capability when it's turned on properly, and they could have turned that off, in which case they would still get the blip of some object traveling at 500 miles per hour, and if they turn it off, they would, if they were paying close attention in the United States, they would absolutely, but they were over the water, which was sort of the border between Malaysia and I think Vietnam's airspace, so it gets a little less accurate or scrutinized when they cross those borders, especially in Asia, or like if you go from Siberia to Russian airspace to Upper Mongolia, they're a little more casual versus going over New York City or Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, some major U.S. Airspace.
Right. So
those transponders, no, they're never turned off in flight. If there is a near miss with collision, you could turn off this TA, which stands for traffic advisory function, because otherwise you're going to get a continuous signal in the airplane to turn left, turn right, climb, descend, and sometimes there are erroneous warnings, in which case you wouldn't want to continuously hear that, so you turn that off. But not ever in a normal situation would you ever turn that transponder off. So yeah, there's something very questionable why they would turn the transponder off and all those other reporting capabilities.
Well, so let me ask you at this point, if this Wall Street Journal article is correct, and this plane continued to fly for 4 hours that we know of, being untracked, if there was some kind of disastrous accident on the plane that took out the electrical information, could this theoretically be flying by itself with nobody on board alive, unmanned at this point? Could it be just flying itself, or is that impossible?
Well, no, if they turned around, one of the tragic accidents was the golfer Payne Stewart was on a corporate jet, and they lost pressurization. And basically, there's not any oxygen up at 30,000 feet. So it doesn't take long for you to become hypoxic and basically stop breathing or lose oxygen. And his plane continued to fly for I don't know how many hours before it ran out of gas and just crashed. And I guess there is that possibility it happened on this airplane, although we are trained, as soon as you lose pressurization, all the bells and whistles and warnings go off, and you have oxygen mask immediately next to you that it's called quick donning. You just pinch these clamps and it slips over your head, and bam, you're all set. And it has smoke goggles attached to it automatically, so if there were smoke and or fire associated with a problem, you're pretty much protected, and you should be able to send out a Mayday report if you're not too busy dealing with the emergency and descend and open up the outflow valves to clear the smoke or whatever the recovery maneuver is for that, company's policies or whatnot.
Right. Well, I know you're busy and you have to get along here, so I just wanted to, end it with this. So at this point, if the Wall Street Journal is correct and this plane continued to fly for 4 hours, in your opinion, knowing the sketchy details that we do, is this more apt then to be taking on the look of a hijacking and somebody actually taking the plane someplace? Or is it still a possibility that this plane just could have completely malfunctioned and they're still flying it who knows where with no ability to communicate?
It's hard to lean one way or the other. I mean, I would think if it were a hijacking, someone would have come forward, or they would have, 2 days ago said, "Oh, we represent such and such," and state the reason for the hijacking. But it seems as though no one's come forward to claim responsibility, and so that makes me wonder about the hijacking theory. As far as a mechanical problem where they just didn't handle it properly and it flew for 4 hours and then disappeared, it still is. There's just so many question marks that it's hard to.
Can you think under any circumstances that you know about the 777 that it would be continue to be flying around full of passengers and crew with no communication and never landing, despite the fact that they were by land or could have been by land in that time?
It would potentially be a pressurization issue or smoke where you couldn't breathe anymore. The autopilot would definitely continue to fly straight and level and eventually run out of fuel, or when it was last touched, if they were in a descent, it'd stay in a descent depending on how steep the descent is. But usually we always dial in an altitude, and even when it reaches that altitude, it levels off. So if it's at a lower altitude, it's going to burn more fuel, and it's not going to have the same capability. Like if it was scheduled to fly to Beijing, just say it's 6 hours away. If they're at a lower altitude, it's only going to fly for maybe 5.5 hours or 5 hours, depending on how low it is. So.
Okay, well, great. Those were really great answers to my questions, and I guess my last question is, one of the conspiracy theories out there, is that they could have possibly landed the plane. This plane was hijacked. They've landed it someplace and are now, changing the paint on it to look like some other plane and could possibly use it in a terrorist act. And then will keep the passengers as hostages. Is that a possibility? Could you, like a stolen car, just switch the license plates and the, paint job and send it back out there without it being tracked?
Well, you would first need a suitable runway, which for a Boeing 777, it has to be certain width, probably at least 8,000 feet long, and even if they're able to land there, they may not be able to take off, just depending on the length of the runway. And to paint that airplane it's quite a big operation.
Okay.
I could see possibly them, keeping the hostages, but like I say, I'm surprised if it were that scenario, why there hasn't been any declaration by some group saying, we're unhappy with this such and such, so we want to draw attention to it. We've done this to, for our cause or whatever, but it's been pretty quiet as far as I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's really, it's still totally unsolved, and everybody I talk to every airline pilot, it's sort of a open discussion. It's like, how many more strange scenarios can there be where they turned the transponder off, where they flew for hours without talking to anyone, where it just disappeared? That is just so bizarre. I would think there would be some radar either through the U.S. Department of Defense or something that would detect pretty much every movement of every aircraft in the sky with the sophisticated radar and computers that we have in today's world.
Right.
So.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah.
insights. It was very illuminating and educating, and I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions, Captain Dave.
My pleasure, Linda. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope I can, help you in any way I can.
Okay. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too.